The DNA test result dropped from Susan's trembling hands like a small bomb, effectively scattering the serenity of her living room and the life she knew. Her heart pounded in her chest, drowning out the clock's persistent ticking and the distant hum of traffic outside. The words on the page seemed to mock her belief in family identity, an identity she had worn like a comforting shroud for decades. Her husband, Tom, seemed to freeze in his chair, held captive by the abrupt silence that cloaked their home. His eyes locked onto the coffee table where the test had landed, its white envelope stark against the dark wood. His calm facade, which once felt like a pillar of strength, now seemed to crumble before her eyes. "This can't be right," he mumbled, but there was no conviction in his voice. Susan recalled the time they first met, the instant connection and the promise of an unshakable future, now riddled with doubt. Their beginnings were vibrant and full of promise, a shared glance across a crowded room that led to endless conversations about dreams, love, and a future so bright it all but blinded them to reality. Yet, here they were. She could feel the weight of years pressing upon her, birthdays, anniversaries, the day they brought their children into the world, now tinted with uncertainty. It felt as though someone had plucked her out of her life and placed her into a parallel universe, one where everything she thought she knew was questioned. She paced the room, mind racing, trying to connect the invisible dots that led from bliss to betrayal. Who else knows? Is everything a lie? These questions lingered, unanswered, echoing off the walls as if the very house cradled her anguish. With determination stoking her resolve, Susan knew she had to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Her gaze returned to Tom, still silent, his eyes now clouded with a mixture of guilt and fear. "You owe me the truth, Tom," she demanded, breaking the brittle quiet that had settled between them. Her voice was a fierce whisper, teetering between heartbreak and rage. Tom hesitated, his response stumbling over his lips. "Susan, I..." "Save it," she interrupted, a surge of courage propelling her forward. "I need facts, not excuses." As she turned to leave the room, her resolve was unshaken. Her journey had just begun. Susan was about to embark on a journey that would lead her through a maze of secrets she had never dared to imagine. But for now, each step she took away from the man she thought she knew brought her closer to the truth. Susan exited the living room, her footsteps heavy against the hardwood floor. She bounded up the stairs, each step a defiant act against the chaos that threatened to swallow her. She found herself standing at the threshold of their bedroom, her sanctuary now tainted with suspicion. Her pulse racing, she closed the door behind her, seeking solace amidst the familiar surroundings that suddenly felt alien. The room was filled with fragments of their life together, the framed photos, the love notes pinned to the corkboard, the souvenirs from places they'd traveled. Each item once resonated with shared memories, but now they seemed to jeer at her naivety. Her mind swirled with questions, each one a dagger of uncertainty. Who was Tom? The man who had pledged his life to her, who had stood beside her through thick and thin, how much of him was real, and how much was a carefully crafted lie? She couldn't shake the gnawing fear that the foundation of her life had been built on deceit. But where to start? How to untangle a web spun over decades? Susan rifled through the drawer of their shared desk, searching for something, anything that might provide clarity. Her fingers brushed against an envelope, buried beneath stacks of papers. She pulled it out, heart skipping a beat as she recognized Tom's handwriting. The letter was addressed to someone she'd never heard of before. Curiosity piqued, she hesitated for a moment before unfolding the paper. The letter was brief but telling. In it, Tom referred to someone named Elaine, speaking of memories and promises, a shared history that predated their own. Each sentence felt like a betrayal painted in ink, a narrative he had never shared with her. Susan leaned against the desk, the weight of the discovery pressing down on her shoulders. Tears burned at the corners of her eyes, yet she fought them back, drawing strength from the anger that simmered beneath her grief. She needed answers, not tears, and she needed them now. Clutching the letter, Susan made her way back downstairs. Tom was still seated on the couch, his hands buried in his face, guilt carving lines into his features. "What is this, Tom?" she demanded, thrusting the letter toward him. Her voice was steady, but her heart was a cacophony of conflicting emotions. Tom looked up, eyes widening as he recognized the envelope. He took a deep breath, shoulders sagging under an invisible weight. "Susan, I can explain," he started, but she cut him off with a raised hand. "You've had years to explain. Why didn't you tell me?" Tom's gaze faltered, dropping to the floor as if seeking refuge from her piercing stare. "It was before we met. Elaine and we were together, but things didn't work out. When I met you, I wanted to start fresh. I never thought." "Never thought what?" "That the past could stay hidden forever." Susan's voice was edged with disbelief. "You should have told me. I deserved to know." Tom sighed, weariness etched into his expression. "It seemed so long ago, like a different life. And then we had our life, our family. I didn't want to jeopardize that." Susan's anger flared, a white-hot flame that consumed her hesitation. "But it did, Tom. The past always catches up. I thought we had trust, honesty. Now I don't know what to believe." Tom reached out, his hand brushing her arm. "Please, Susan, we can work through this. I love you." She recoiled from his touch, stepping back as if burned. Love, what did that mean now, in the face of such deception? "I need some time, Tom. To think, to decide what to do next." Susan turned away, her heart aching with a cacophony of unresolved pain. She walked back upstairs, leaving Tom to grapple with the consequences of his silence. The facade of her life lay in shambles around her, the perfect picture she cherished now marred by cracks. In the solitude of their bedroom, Susan allowed herself to break. The tears she'd held at bay flowed freely, each drop a release of the tension that had taken root within her. As she sat on the edge of the bed, she understood that the journey to uncover the truth was far from over. There were still pieces to the puzzle that needed fitting, stories untold and wounds unhealed. The next morning, Susan awoke with a renewed sense of purpose. The exhaustion of emotion had left her weary, yet determination sparked anew in her chest. Today, she would take the first step toward reclaiming her life and understanding the full scope of the reality she lived in. With the letter in hand, she decided to start by reaching out to the only clue she had, Elaine. The name was a specter of her husband's past, but perhaps it held the key to understanding the intricacies of the tangled web she found herself ensnared in. Susan hesitated a moment, thumb hovering over the phone screen. Was she ready to do this? The search was surprisingly simple. Within minutes, she had tracked down a number associated with Elaine's name and address. The digital age's unrelenting accessibility offered a small comfort amidst the chaos. Now, facing the prospect of dialing the number, her heart thrummed in her chest with apprehension and excitement in equal measure. The line rang only twice before a voice answered, a woman's pleasant tone tinged with curiosity. "Hello." Susan took a steadying breath. "Hi, this is Susan. Susan Harper. I was wondering if I could speak with Elaine." The pause on the other end of the line felt eternal. "This is Elaine. How can I help you?" Susan hesitated, the weight of what she was about to reveal sitting heavily on her tongue. "I'm calling about Tom. I think it's time we had a conversation about the past." Elaine's intake of breath was audible, a gasp that spoke volumes of shared secrets and hidden histories. "I see," she replied, voice steady though laced with an undercurrent of something unspoken. "I've been expecting this call, if I'm honest." Susan's mind raced, the admission both a shock and a validation of her deepest fears. "You knew about us, about everything?" There was a soft sigh, the sound of resignation and regret. "I knew about you, yes. There are things you need to know. Things that shouldn't have been kept from you." With her heart lodged firmly in her throat, Susan found the strength to respond. "Then let's talk, Elaine. Let's finally put all these secrets out in the open." As she ended the call, Susan felt the first threads of understanding weave their way into the tangled tapestry of her life. Elaine was a part of Tom's past, a past that refused to stay buried. But Elaine was also her link to the truth, the ally she never knew she needed. Now, faced with unraveling years of half-truths and facades, Susan realized she was no longer alone. Together, they could uncover the truth and, perhaps, forge a path toward healing and justice. Susan sat in the dim light of her kitchen, the morning sun creeping gradually through the curtains, casting long shadows across the room. Her thoughts were a turbulent sea, but within the chaos, she held tightly to the hope that Elaine might offer the clarity she so desperately needed. Her resolve solidified with each passing moment. She would walk this path bravely, asking the questions she feared, and confronting the answers she dreaded. Determined not to delay what needed to be done, Susan set off to meet Elaine that afternoon. The drive was a blur of scenery and thoughts, memories of her life with Tom meshing uneasily with the unknowns of his past. After what felt like an eternity, she arrived at a quaint little cafe nestled in a quiet neighborhood. The air was thick with the scent of coffee and freshly baked pastries, a comfort that contrasted starkly with the tension in her chest. Elaine spotted Susan first. She was seated at a corner table, her posture poised yet welcoming, a calm presence amidst Susan's storm. As Susan approached, she noted the hints of age that had softened Elaine's youthful features, a streak of silver in her hair, the gentle lines etched by time around her eyes. "Thank you for meeting me," Susan began, offering a tentative smile as she took a seat. Her voice held a note of gratitude mixed with anticipation. Elaine nodded, her expression a curious mix of sympathy and guilt. "Of course. It's time, isn't it? Time to lay everything bare." Susan couldn't help but appreciate Elaine's frankness. "Yes, it's time," she agreed, her voice firmer now. "I have so many questions. About Tom, about you, about everything." Elaine took a deep breath, her gaze steady. "Tom and I, we were once very close. We met in college, young and full of dreams. But life happened. We drifted apart, choices were made, and eventually, he met you." Susan listened intently, absorbing each word as if it were a missing piece of a jigsaw puzzle. "I always wondered if he'd told you about us," Elaine continued, her eyes searching Susan's face for understanding. "It was a different time. We made mistakes, ones that couldn't be undone." "What about the letter?" Susan asked, her curiosity piqued. "It seemed like there was more between you two than I ever knew." Elaine sighed, regret shadowing her expression. "The letter was my final farewell. We had stayed in touch sporadically, mostly for closure. But, Susan, I promise you there was nothing beyond that. Tom was devoted to you. I never intended to disrupt your lives." Susan's heart ached at Elaine's sincerity, a truth she desperately wanted to believe. Yet it left her with more questions, each one more complex than the last. Then why the DNA test? Why did it show what it did? Elaine hesitated, as if weighing the impact of her next words. "There's something you need to understand, Susan. Love, life, it's rarely simple. Sometimes, our actions have consequences that ripple through time in ways we could never anticipate." Susan leaned in, every fiber of her being focused on Elaine, hungry for the truth. "The test wasn't wrong," Elaine admitted, her voice a whisper. "Tom and I, before we parted ways, there was a child." Susan felt the air rush from her lungs. "A child?" Her voice was choked, the revelation a heavy blow. Elaine nodded, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "Yes. I was young, scared. I gave him up for adoption before I even told Tom. It wasn't until later, much later, that he even found out." Susan's mind raced, the enormity of Elaine's confession reverberating through her. It was the missing link, the shadow that loomed over her perfect family portrait, a piece of Tom's past that had finally caught up with them. "Did he ever look for him?" Susan asked, her voice subdued, the fight momentarily sapped from her body. "I think he tried, in his own way," Elaine replied softly. But by then, he had his life with you, with your children. It was a part of his past he couldn't change. Both women fell silent, lost in their thoughts. Susan stared down at her coffee, now cold and forgotten, as the implications of Elaine's revelation settled upon her. The family she'd spent her life building was entwined with another, one she'd never imagined. What do I do now? Susan murmured, her voice barely audible. It was a question forged from the depths of her uncertainty. Elaine reached out, placing a comforting hand over Susan's. Now, you decide what you need. For you, for your family. But remember, the past doesn't define the love and life you've built. Susan nodded, absorbing Elaine's words, drawing strength from them. She knew she had a choice to make, between clinging to the past and embracing the uncertain future with all its revelations. Rising from the table, Susan offered Elaine a genuine smile, one born of shared understanding and tentative hope. Thank you, Elaine. For the truth. For everything. Elaine returned the smile, her eyes warm. Good luck, Susan. I hope you find peace. As Susan left the cafe, the weight on her shoulders felt lighter, though the journey ahead still promised challenges. She knew the road to healing would be long, yet she was no longer alone. She had allies, seen and unseen, in her quest for truth and closure. Driving back home, her mind was a whirlwind of emotions, but within the chaos, a plan began to form. She would talk to Tom again, not with accusations, but with questions born from understanding. And she would reach out to her children, anchoring herself in the love that remained untainted by the discovery of an unfamiliar past. The house was quiet when she returned, the stillness a stark contrast to the revelations of the day. She found Tom in the kitchen, staring absently out the window, his thoughts a mystery. His face was drawn, lined with the worry and guilt that had settled there permanently since the DNA results came to light. Tom, she said softly, gaining his attention. He turned, meeting her gaze with a mixture of apprehension and hope. Susan, are you okay? Susan nodded, stepping toward him. I talked to Elaine, she said, her voice steady, the storm within her momentarily calmed by a newfound clarity. Tom's eyes widened, the faintest glimmer of relief flickering across his features. Thank you. I know I should have told you. I wanted to protect us, protect you. Susan reached out, touching his arm lightly, a gesture of reconciliation. I understand now. We need to talk, Tom. Really talk, about everything. He nodded, a silent promise to finally open up. As they stood together in the kitchen, it was clear that the journey was far from over. But for the first time in days, Susan felt a fragile strand of hope weaving through the tapestry of uncertainty, a glimmer of light in the shadows of the past. As Susan and Tom sat down at the kitchen table, the familiarity of their shared space offered a touch of comfort. The sun was setting outside, casting a warm glow through the window and illuminating the room with a soft light. It was time to bring everything into the open, to purge the shadows from their marriage with the harsh light of truth. Susan, I never wanted to hurt you, Tom began, his voice heavy with sincerity and regret. When I found out about the child Elaine gave up, I was shocked. I should have told you back then, but I was scared. Susan listened, her heart aching for the secret pain he must have carried. Why didn't you? Didn't you think I deserved to know? Tom nodded, his eyes filled with remorse. I was afraid. Afraid of losing you, of disrupting the life we'd built. So I buried it, convinced myself it was in the past. But things like this never stay buried, Susan replied, her voice softer now, the edge of betrayal tempered by understanding. She had learned this truth over the past few days. I know that now, Tom admitted, covering his face with his hands. I thought I could protect us. But secrets like that, they have a way of eating at you. Susan reached out, taking his hands, her touch a promise to face this together. Tom, I met Elaine today. She told me everything. He looked up, surprise mixed with relief. Anne. And it's a lot to process, Susan said slowly, searching his gaze. But I understand now. I think she's been carrying her own burden all these years. Like you. Tom nodded, his eyes glistening with gratitude and sadness. Elaine is a good person. We were both different people back then. Susan inhaled deeply, steadying herself for the path she was about to propose. Tom, there's something we need to do. We need to find him, your son. Tom's breath caught, emotion flaring in his eyes. You do that? With me? Yes, Susan responded firmly, her resolve unwavering. Because he's part of our family now, whether we like it or not. He deserves to know us, and we him. It's time to make this right. Tom's expression softened, filled with a deep sense of relief and love for the woman who had stood by him despite everything. Thank you, Susan. I don't deserve you. Susan squeezed his hands, a small smile forming on her lips. Maybe not, but we'll figure this out together. Besides, none of us are perfect. We're human. We make mistakes. Together, they began the journey of tracking down Tom's son, a young man whose existence had only recently become a part of their reality. With the help of modern technology and some guidance from Elaine, they discovered that his name was Michael and that he lived just a few towns over, working as a teacher. The prospect of meeting Michael was daunting, and both Susan and Tom felt the weight of anticipation hanging over them as they planned the meeting. The drive to Michael's town was filled with nervous conversation, the uncertainty of how he might react to their unexpected intrusion into his life casting a shadow over their hopes. As they parked outside the school where Michael worked, Susan turned to Tom. Are you ready? Tom took a deep breath, his hand steadying hers. No, but I'm here. Together, they made their way to the entrance, emotions swirling as they approached the information desk. When Michael finally appeared, Susan was struck by the familiarity in his features, the same hazel eyes as Tom, the same infectious smile. Her heart ached with affection for this young man who was suddenly so important to them. Hi, Michael, Tom began, his voice wavering slightly. I'm Tom, and this is my wife, Susan. We're here because there's something very important we need to tell you. Michael looked between them, curiosity etched in his expression. Okay, he said cautiously. What's this about? Susan stepped in, feeling the need to share the burden of the truth. Michael, it's about your birth parents. We have reason to believe that Tom is your biological father. The words hung in the air, and she watched as Michael processed the revelation, a mix of shock and disbelief crossing his face. I've always wondered about them, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. But, this is a lot to take in. We understand, Tom said gently. And we're not here to disrupt your life. We just wanted to offer you the chance to know us, if that's something you're open to. Michael nodded slowly, his gaze softening. I've always felt like something was missing, you know. Like a piece of my history was out of place. Maybe this is it. Relief washed over Susan, her heart swelling with hope. We don't expect anything, she added quickly. But we'd love to get to know you, to share who we are and hear about your life. As the conversation continued, Susan felt a profound sense of healing take place. Michael was bright, kind, and open to exploring this unexpected chapter of his life. She and Tom shared stories of their lives, their children, and their dreams, and in turn, learned about Michael's passions and aspirations. In the weeks that followed, they spent more time with Michael, slowly integrating him into their family circle. The process was not without its challenges, but with each meeting, Susan noticed the bond strengthening between them. One evening, after a family dinner filled with laughter and shared stories, Susan and Tom sat together on their porch, the stars twinkling above them like a blanket of quiet reassurance. We did it, Tom said, his arm wrapped around Susan. We faced our past and made something beautiful out of it. Susan leaned against him, feeling the warmth of his presence. Yes, we did, she agreed. And for the first time in a long time, I feel like our family is whole. As they sat together, enveloped in a peaceful night, Susan knew that their journey had brought them to a place of healing and understanding. They had faced the darkness of secrets, emerging stronger and more united than ever. And though the road had been long and fraught with emotional trials, Susan felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing they had forged a future filled with love and possibility.